You have to be prepared as an animal rights advocate to be laughed at even though you're making really good points. Hello fellow creature, welcome back to Rooftop Talks. Today I want to talk a little bit about the Overton window. The Overton window is a range of subjects and arguments that are politically acceptable to the mainstream population at a given time. This Overton window can move over time. An important thing to understand about the Overton window is that it has no bearing on the truth of a subject, it has no bearing on the logical or factual consistency of a claim or of an argument. It is merely about what the public is ready to receive and accept and talk about. So for example, there might have been a time in history where it was not within the Overton window to present the argument that the Earth was spherical, that it was a globe, and that the Earth orbits the Sun and not the Sun orbiting the Earth. There was a point in time where the public was not ready to receive that message and they were not ready to talk about it. But did that mean the facts and the logical consistency of the globe theory argument were any less valid, were any less real? No. Now, you start to learn about the Overton window when you're discussing ideas, presenting arguments. All of a sudden you find people are really resistant and they start behaving irrationally towards you. Their arguments are really illogical and they're very irrational. And they make all these kind of fallacies, and yet they receive massive support. It's because you're not in the Overton window. I'll give you examples of things that are currently within the Overton window. It's 2025 when I'm recording this. Feminism, atheism, it's very much in the public discussion. I would say AI is very much within the Overton window, talking about job displacement. The technology has made it so that we have to talk about it, really. Race discrimination is in the Overton window. We owe it to people who were very active in the 60s. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou. Many names, only scratching the surface there. They led the charge, and we're like, any discussion we have is now following on from them who broke open this topic. So when you're in the Overton window, creating conversations and having an argument, having a point of view, and trying to make your point of view heard, it's almost effortless. Some points of view more than others. But if you're outside of the Overton window, it's really fucking hard to make your ideas heard. You need to put in a lot of groundwork with whatever you're saying. The people you're going to be making the arguments to, they don't even have the beginner knowledge on the topic, right? They weren't taught in school. They weren't taught it in their job training. They didn't have discussions around the dinner table with it. Any argument you want to make inside a subject, such as, for example, animal rights and veganism, you have to start from scratch. You have to give them the basics. This is quite exhausting as well. As an animal rights advocate myself, I find that I have to do a lot of repetition of the very basics of animal ethics. Very basic stuff that really should be taught in schools. It should be a familiar concept to many people, but it's not. Because it's not in the Overton window, there's nothing about animal rights in our education system at all. I try to shortcut my way past it by just asking provocative questions, for example. It feels like I have to teach people from scratch. So yeah, animal rights is still very much outside of the Overton window, despite it having a generation before us, which is where we saw the formation of groups like PETA. You had writers like Tom Regan and Leslie Cross. Those belong to a different generation, to a previous generation to ours. And yet, it's a very small number of people in that early generation of vegans. So when you're outside of the Overton window, regardless of how logically consistent your argument is or how grounded it is in real facts and statistics, you're still gonna hear the same kind of resistance. And these are very familiar to anyone who has been making arguments from outside of the Overton window. So things you might hear are things like, everyone should be free to make their own choices. It's my choice what I do with my slaves. I mean, my animal slaves. Or you're an extremist. you are a cult member, you belong to a cult, right? These are things that people will say, and it really doesn't matter the strength of your argument, the proposals you're making, and how salient those points are. You know, I really looked up to Christopher Hitchens in the atheist movement. It's one of the four horsemen, I think they call themselves. I really was inspired by Christopher Hitchens and the way that he made arguments. The way he could engage people in debates was just incredible.
Theism, that not only can we establish this prime mover's existence, but we can show by some form of induction that he intervenes in wars, that he answers prayers, that he cares who we sleep with and in what position, that what food we eat and on what days, is a ridiculous proposition. It's a claim to a truth that no primate can claim to make. Primates who claim to know it should be distrusted. Great damage has been done and continues to be done by such people and by such ideas. You're better off thinking for yourself and taking all the risks, and I might add, all the pleasures that will come from that. The most overrated of the virtues is faith.
He seemed to just dance circles around his opponents in the discussion over theism versus atheism. And you know, I've been taking notes. I take pointers from his debates because he did such a great job. But it started to become apparent to me that he was having a much easier time with the audience.
I think it will one day be admitted with shame that it might have been in error to say that AIDS is bad as a disease, very bad, but not quite as bad as condoms are bad, or not as immoral in the same way. I say it in the presence of His grace, and I say it to His face. The preachings of His church are responsible for the death and suffering and misery of millions of His brother and sister Africans, and He should apologize for it. He should show some shame.
Getting applause from the audience, not being laughed at for his ideas from the audience, even his opponents, him not having to always retread common ground with the arguments for atheism. I just realized he's having an easier time making his arguments, communicating his skepticism for religious views and practices and religious history. His comebacks fetched a lot of applause. It delighted the audience to hear him deliver a quip or a one-liner. And this is because the debates I was watching from him occurred in the 90s and 2000s when the Overton window had shifted, when the public, when people were ready to hear a secular argument for atheism, or at least religious skepticism, I guess you could call it. This bird is going fucking crazy. I have been noticing the reception of my ideas right now has less to do with how well I am making the point. It has less to do with how consistent the view is. It has less to do with the outcomes of my proposals. And it has a lot more to do with the Overton window. Whether the people I'm talking with are ready to hear it. But this does give me a slight sense of optimism, just knowing that when we manage to push this through and the Overton window opens up, when we break open that Overton window and we're able to talk about the animals where people see it as a serious subject. They don't see it as a diet or health, lifestyle. No, they're talking about animal ethics for the animals. When that Overton window opens up to us, it'll be a lot easier. Things that we can do to move the Overton window. Education. We should be laying the groundwork of animal rights and animal ethics at all times. Through the timeline of someone's life, they might have one interaction or encounter or lesson where they start learning some of the basics of animal ethics, and it doesn't change their behavior, it doesn't change their activity. But later on, when they visit a Cube of Truth, when they talk to a vegan about it, they're able to engage, and it won't be from square one, it will be from square 5. And then we can get them the rest of the way there in a later interaction. People might not go vegan from one interaction. I know I certainly didn't. So education is really important for laying the groundwork. And unfortunately, it just takes longer, and it also takes a little bit more mental fortitude, like I've talked about in the past. You have to be prepared as an animal rights advocate to be laughed at even though you're making really good points. That's what you will experience, where the great vegan personal trainer guy brought up the topic of animal rights. I can't remember this conservative pundit's name. The first thing he said was, "Did you lose a bet or something when you brought this topic up to me?"
I believe that the breeding, exploitation, and killing of animals for food when we do not have to is immoral. And obviously you...
Did you lose a bet?
No. So again, I'm serious. I would ask for a fair chance at a debate without shooing me off the mic or making jokes, please.
And that got a little bit of a laugh from the crowd. And I thought, there's one. The Overton window. The topic of animal rights is not even seen as a real topic. It's seen as a joke to these people. In a way that identity politics isn't seen as a joke. It's seen as a threat to some people, but it's not seen as a joke. There's a difference there. Discrimination, race discrimination, it's seen sometimes as a threat, sometimes as a very dangerous topic, but never as a joke. With this guy, the first response was to laugh at the vegan who brought up animal rights and animal ethics. That said to me that this has not yet entered the Overton window. Yeah, it's very much outside of the Overton window, but it won't always be. At one point, there will be a tip in the scales, and we'll find it easier. Let's work towards getting the general public to take veganism seriously, and let's open up that Overton window for veganism. See you in the next video.
They're making our food out of people. Next thing, they'll be breeding us like cattle for food. You gotta tell them. You gotta tell them.
Promise, Tiger, I promise. I'll tell the exchange.
You tell everybody. Listen to me, Hatcher. You gotta tell them silent breed is people! We gotta stop them somehow!